our subject here is the foundation of strength. And, you know, in our culture, what people usually the go-to when they think about being strong, they think about muscles and they think about muscular strength. And certainly muscular strength is an element of being strong. There's no question about it. But there are a lot of other elements as well. And you know, slowly through the series, I'm going to look at different, let's say, the pillars of strength or different aspects of being strong. In my work, and I've had a private practice, you know, pretty consistently for more than 40 years, and it's interesting if I look back on the patterns of injury, you know, and the way people injure themselves when they come in. So, of course, some people injure themselves doing their sport. But from my perspective, other than car accidents, which of course is one of the most dangerous things we do is just get in a car, is one of the most common ways that people injure themselves is gardening. And you know, who knew it was such a dangerous activity? And I think it can be, I'll talk about it for a moment because we can see some of the elements in it that actually get people in trouble in other domains as well. In gardening, you have people who maybe haven't been doing those kinds of actions recently, and then they decide, okay, Saturday, I'm gonna weed the whole garden, or whatever they decide they're gonna do. And they go out and they're doing things that involve strength. They're pulling weeds, they're clearing things, they're doing things like that. And in the process of that, there'll often be a wrenching of the back, or they'll get themselves in some kind of trouble. And so I want to talk about one of the first principles, and it's a very important principle in the Feldenkrais method in general, and it very much applies to the mobilizing of strength, which is making a distinction between what I would call strain and effort. So in the method, we often talk about reducing effort, and a better organized movement is generally associated with less effort. But there's a difference between we'll go back to gardening. If I am pulling up something and I have got myself, my center is behind my arms and I am pulling that out, if I'm well organized, even if I'm not that strong, I should be able to mobilize my strength safely to do that. It's when people, a lot of times in gardening, they do things and they don't have their core behind their arms. And that's where they hurt their back, they hurt their arms, they hurt their neck. And they're not distinguishing between healthy mobilizing of their strength and strain. So that's one of the things that I think we really can study and learn in the method by going slowly and subtly making those distinctions, because the more the system is lined up with our intention, the more our muscular system, our neuromuscular system, the skeletal system is lined up, the more we can express strength, organize ourselves for strength safely. And that very much applies to athletes who have to make decisions about when they're pushing themselves and when they're not pushing themselves. And this is something that, you know, I've worked with a lot of high-level athletes, and they have often really refined that ability in themselves and really understand that there's some days they can't push themselves in the same way and other days they can. Whereas Other people that I've worked with seem very confused around that point and making that distinction. So for those of you who are new to the method, this is one of the elements that's the hardest for people to adjust to in the beginning, is it's not exercise, and that we're all the time working in a smaller range and looking to reduce the effort in order to improve the quality of the organization. And I'll keep talking about that as we go along. So I think what we'll do is jump into the movement lesson, and I'll be talking about principles as we go, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. So if you could go to your chair, and it would be really nice if I could see you moving. I'm always going to teach better when I can see some people. Of course, not everybody has to do that because I won't be able to see all of you anyway. But so just find your way to the chair, and yes. Can be a stool, of course. And rest, scoot yourself forward so you're not leaning against the back of the chair, and just rest your hands quietly on your thighs. And first of all, settle into the position and close your eyes for a moment. Close your eyes and just notice where you landed here without correcting yourself, without changing. Just if you can just catch where you spontaneously sat. Where are you facing? Are you facing directly forward, or is one eye a little bit more forward than the other eye? Is one shoulder a little bit more forward? How is your weight distributed on the pelvis there? Most people will have a little more weight on one side than the other, but you may notice that it's more than a little. And notice also the distribution of weight in the feet, and whether where the knee is in relation to the foot. Maybe you're ready to stand more on one leg than the other leg. Now, again, without adjusting or correcting yourself, just open your eye and see where your gaze lands. Where in the area in front of you are you looking? Is it a little bit to the left or the right? Is it more up or more down? Observe these things as much as possible without judgment. Now, go ahead and look down towards the floor and then up towards the ceiling. Let's just see how far up you can see in the ceiling and how comfortably you can look down between your legs. Just observe how that is this morning. Stop in the middle and turn yourself slightly so your nose is pointing towards your left knee and then towards your right knee. And see if one of those directions is easier for you. And stay with your nose pointing towards the knee that's easier for you. And if one does not seem particularly easier than the other, then just choose a side. And now bring your nose down towards that thigh. We're going to call this the first side. So you bring your nose down towards the leg of the first side. And Go down as far as you can comfortably, and then come a little bit back from there and stay there. And now draw a line with your nose out to your knee and then back along your thigh. So perhaps you can think about a beautiful color that you are painting with your nose on your leg. You keep your face parallel, more or less parallel to the leg, and you're going to trace with your nose out to the knee and back towards your hip joint. Only go so far as you can comfortably. So your face stays facing your leg all the time. Some of you will be able to bring your head down towards the leg a little bit. Other people will have their head further away from the knee. And you do what's comfortable with you, but see if you can bring your nose out over the knee. So that's going to involve using not just your neck, but using more of yourself. So you can feel that your weight will shift a little bit towards that side, a little bit forward in order for you to do that. Okay, now pause for a moment. So one of the elements of well-organized movement is going to be smoothness and quality. So I'm seeing a good bit of jerkiness as people are doing this. See if you can do it again and slow it down, and how could you find a way to do it more smoothly? One way would be not to restrict your breathing. So just make sure your breathing is going on. Have your face above your leg, and you paint with your nose to the knee and back again. See if that can be smooth and continuous. So I noticed that a number of you slowed down, and that improved the quality. And you're on the right track, because when you move slowly, you can sense more and you can make those calibrations. So this is not an exercise that we're doing, it's a learning process. So you can kind of remind your neuromuscular system, remind yourself about your options in terms of better organized movement. Okay, and just sit for a moment. Sit for a moment. And each time you sit, you just be open to how you're sitting after that. And notice if the distribution of your weight is a little bit different after what we just did. Now let me describe the next movement, and then when it's clear to you, you go ahead and do it. So you bring your face above your leg in the same way, and you go out towards the knee and back again, except this time, same leg. You stay with the same leg. Go out on the outside and then back towards your trunk on the inside, and then reverse it and go out on the inside and back towards your trunk on the outside. So you're doing the same movement of tracing a line with your nose, and it's going out towards your knee and then back again towards your center. But you're doing it in a kind of circular fashion. See if you can make it smooth and pleasurable. So you feel that as you do this, what we think of as the core is not only your abdomen and low back, but actually it's your whole trunk. And you'll feel that you have to calibrate as you do this. There's all kinds of complexity in how the muscles will be contracting and decontracting as you move left and right, and you move out and back again. So the smoother you move, that shows that your neuromuscular system is calibrating this in a more and more efficient way. Come to sit again. And just sit for a moment and see with those experiments how you're sitting. Notice if you observe any difference in the sense of the volume of your breath, or do you have a sense of having more space for your breath on one side than the other? How are you resting on your pelvis? What kind of support do you feel? Now go again, look down towards the floor and look up towards the ceiling and see if there's been any shift there from what we've done so far. Perhaps you feel a shift that's global, or maybe you feel something different on the two sides. Now, bring your face again over the same knee that you've been working with, and bring your nose out above. So, it's not going to be exactly above, but so that your nose is ready is facing the knee. And now circle your nose around the knee. And when I say circle the nose, I don't mean that you're just moving in your neck. You move the whole trunk in order to circle the nose. Pick one direction and stay with that direction. So of course your head and neck will move, but your whole trunk, your whole pelvis is moving as you do that. You can experiment with different size circles, a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, always going for smoothness. And as you make the circle, shift your attention around to different parts of yourself. What about your feet? Make sure you're not gripping the floor with your feet. Feet are resting. There's always a question of what needs to be active. You feel how, as you make the circle, how is your low back involved with that? See, the low back can be very awake and very active. And stop for a moment before you go in the other direction. Just pause for a moment. And then when you're ready, you make the circle in the other direction. Now, see if I see some of you look like you're really beginning to find a way of moving that starts to look more pleasurable. You do it a few times thinking, okay, now I've got the idea. Is there a way that I could do this so it's a little more enjoyable? Okay, that's looking good. And sit for a moment. Sit for a moment and just feel the balance between your two sides now. In the beginning, I asked you, where was your gaze? And just notice, where is your gaze now? So many people will notice when they start that maybe their eyes are slightly to one side, slightly to the left or the right. And you may notice a shift with that already. Or maybe your gaze is a little higher than it was. Could be a little lower, depending on where you started. Notice the sense of support you feel in the pelvis. Now, point your nose in towards the other leg now, and put your the one hand on that leg, and now begin to make that nice colorful line from your knee on this side back towards your hip joint. Start slowly. Let more of your let yourself get used to the movement on this side. Don't try to do it exactly like you did it on the other side. Just let it grow and respect any differences there might be. So in the Feldenkrais method, we're not that concerned about symmetry in the sense of everybody has some asymmetry. The way our nervous system is organized, there's a dominant eye, a dominant arm. Asymmetry is part of human functioning. However, when the asymmetry becomes too big, or we don't really have control of it, it can really affect our functioning and thus our ability to mobilize for strong movement. When we have a bias towards one side and then we need to, going back to gardening, pull something from that other side, we see this a lot in my Aikido practice because we're always switching from one side to the other, and how differently and how much more safely people may organize themselves on one side than the other. Sit for a moment. So it's this, for those of you who are more new to the method, again, although we're interested in differences between the two sides, we're not coming with this attitude of correcting ourselves, but more an attitude of curiosity. I like seeing a number of you stopped before I asked you to stop. So that's that distinguishing between, when you've had enough and you can't listen in the same way. It's always better to stop sooner, and then you can start again sooner. So now bring your nose again over this leg and make that circular motion where you go out on the outside and go around in front of the knee, and then your nose comes back on the inside of the leg, and then you reverse that. So you make that kind of circular motion, reaching out and then coming back again. So you'll notice that your weight will be forward on your pelvis and then backwards on your pelvis. Some of you are still interfering with your breathing. See if you just let your breathing, your belly, you can breathe in your belly, even though you're moving the pelvis. Doesn't have to interfere with the breathing. Our breathing system is incredibly versatile. We can breathe in all kinds of situations. If one part can't expand, another part can expand. Pause for a moment and then switch the direction. And then just sit and have a rest. And check in now that you've worked a little bit with the other side. How is that developing in terms of how you're sitting? And what difference does it make how you're sitting related to the theme we have here of strength? Well, again, if you're sitting very far back or very far forward, it's going to mean that the trunk muscles are engaged in a way that doesn't allow for the full expression of strength. So once the trunk muscles are working in a little bit more of a balanced way with each other, then your ability to use those core muscles gets better and better. Okay, come back to the second leg and make a little circle around the knee, like you did on the other side. Just with your nose, again, you can imagine you're painting with a beautiful color if that gives you pleasure. And you make a nice circle around this knee. And notice when you're not as balanced now, right? You have, let's say there's more of a balance challenge now. So just notice if you start to grip the floor with a foot or hold your breath, and see if you can really do this smoothly. You do it a few times one way, pause, and then do it a few times the other way. It can be a very small circle, or it can be a larger circle. You can experiment with the side of the circle. You know what we're up to now. Okay. Now sit again for a moment. See if what kind of support you have in sitting now. Are you aware that something having changed in how you organize yourself for sitting right now? Where is your gaze? Where are you facing? Now go ahead and look up towards the ceiling. See how far you look now, and then look down. And as you do that, notice what's happening with your weight and what's happening with the pelvis. Feel, when does your weight shift forward and when does your weight shift backwards? Really notice what's the sensation in the low back, sensation in the front of yourself as you do that, how your weight changes. Now, stop for a moment. Just rest your hands on your legs again. Now, without moving your head, do that same movement of the pelvis. So you just shift your weight backwards a little so your back rounds, and then push your belly forward a little as the back arches. Don't do 100% of what you can do. Just keep it at somewhere 60 or 70%. The idea is more to do it clearly. You really feel your weight go behind the sitting bones and in front of the sitting bones. Pause again for a moment. Put both hands on your right leg. And so your nose is pointing towards your right knee. And now do the same movement. So you shift your weight diagonally backwards towards the left side of the pelvis, the left sitting bone, and maybe behind it. And then your belly button goes forward toward your hands. Now see if you can do that Do it 2 or 3 times, letting your head move and your nose point towards your leg and away from your leg as you go. So your whole back rounds. So your face faces the ceiling and then faces your leg. You do it 2 or 3 times like that, and then without changing position, fix your head in space, and just move the pelvis. Gently, gently. So it's more about clarity than it is the amount of movement. You may feel some interesting sensations then between your shoulder blades and in the middle of your back. Your spine has to organize differently when you don't bring your head in. Okay, leave that, sit in the center, and just have a little rest in the center. Now, maybe you'd like to rest leaning back against the chair or go for a little walk. Just do something that is restful for you. So we think about a rest as it's a physical rest, but it's also a rest of the attention. And come back to your chair. Sense how you're sitting at this moment. How's that sitting posture developing? Do you feel a sense of additional support developing here? When our alignment increases and some of the habitual holding is shifted, sometimes some of you will feel a sense of less effort in sitting. Now, put your hands on the other leg, the left leg now. Point your nose towards the left leg. And a few times you just round your back and look towards the ceiling and then look towards the floor in this position, a little bit diagonal. And again, don't force yourself to do it the way you did it on the other side. Be curious. How is it on this side? Everybody has a difference between the two sides. It could be a subtle difference. It could be a large difference. So in the method, the first thing we do is observe without judgment. And then you can explore. I wonder if I went a tiny bit more to the left, maybe it'd be easier for me to come forward. Or, I think I'm holding in my chest. Maybe if I allowed my chest to soften, something would be different. So you experiment without judging yourself. Be kind with yourself. Now, pause for a moment, still with your nose facing the same way, and tilt your pelvis without moving your head. So you bring the weight forward and backwards. Your belly button goes towards your hands and away from your hands. You're not looking down at your leg. Look out at the wall in front of you. So you're just facing forward there. That's it. That's it. And then let your head come along again and just do 2 or 3 movements as enjoyably as you can. Bringing yourself That's it. Okay, and now come to the center and have a rest. And sit again with your feet on the ground, and some of you were resting leaning back. You just come forward a little bit. See how you're sitting now when you're unsupported, if that's developed as we've gone along. Now, you remember a few movements ago, we were tracing around the knee with the nose. Now make we'll include the whole range here. So you can go out on one side, point your nose out in front of the one knee, across to the other knee, and then back again towards your center on the outside of the other leg. So you kind of trace a big circular motion starting on one side, reaching out with your nose and coming back on the other side. So this means that your weight is going to shift from one side of the pelvis to the other. And check your breathing as you do it. Make sure you're breathing. And you could turn this into a full circle if you want to. So you could have your nose pointing down, right, very close to the top of your thighs, and then go out again. You'll see if that's comfortable for you. Change direction if you haven't already. See if there's any areas of the circle that are not as smooth. And take a little pause and then go find that area and just go back and forth over that area and see if you move your attention to different parts of yourself. Maybe you're gripping the floor with your feet. Maybe you're holding your breath there. Or maybe there's something you need to allow in your trunk that would bring a little more smoothness there. Sometimes if you kind of let your unconscious inform you, just let a thought come to you or a sensation come to you and follow it. The worst that can happen in that case is you just let something come. Oh, my ribs. And you try it. You see, what if I put attention there? Is there something else that could happen there? So this could be a little more pleasurable, a little more smooth. Okay, and now sit up, and just have a rest in sitting. Is it more possible to rest in sitting? Do you have a little more support there? Notice where your weight is now. You're breathing. Sense of volume. See if you can sense your breathing not only in the front, but in the back as well. go ahead and look up and down again. And just see if, with a little more balance between the front and the back, if you have also more options there, more range. And now next time you're looking up, keep your head looking up and look a little bit to one side and a little bit to the other side. Just move your head, the back of your head, towards one shoulder and let that shift your weight. Let it shift your weight to one side and then let it shift your weight to the other side. You move your head, you move your gaze. You're curious about something on your ceiling. Make sure you breathe as you do it. Can you allow the movement of the head to shift your weight on the pelvis so it suggests a movement of the pelvis? There you go. There you go. Okay. And just sit again quietly. Sensing the volume of your breathing. So I mentioned different elements as we went along that related to strength. And another very important one that is, going on in this lesson is the relationship between the agonists and the antagonists. So one of the things that interferes with the mobilization of strength and interferes with comfortable sitting and having a balance in the trunk is when the muscles, either in the front or the back, the flexors or the extensors, are overworking and therefore are not available for full contraction and full lengthening for basic movements. So that's a big theme in this lesson, is finding more balance between the front and the back so that you're able to use these strong muscles for whatever your heart desires to do. So now go ahead and stand up and notice how you're standing. Stand for a moment and then just shift your weight a little bit forward and a little bit back. And see if you can feel what's the range where you can just be comfortable, you cannot interfere with your breathing, just shifting a little bit forward and a little bit back. Coming onto your heels and onto the front of the foot. Maybe you can feel how, as you do that, muscles in your trunk are going to mobilize, they're going to contract and decontract. That's what we need, is the availability of our whole neuromuscular system to be free to respond to the action that we're engaged in. Go ahead and walk around a little bit and then take like a 2-minute break of walking around or whatever you would like to do, and then I'll be available for some questions. Somebody said they went for a walk right beforehand and they were feeling an old injury in their foot, which the pain is gone now.
Someone else said that standing up at the end was the most powerful and stable I have ever felt in standing.
Wow, great,
Oh.
great. I think it's quite interesting about the toe too, because, you know, you'd say, was that a toe lesson? Was that a lesson for the toe? But of course, we have habits of where we're bearing weight in our feet, and when those, you know, when those habits are disrupted, and we can have a new pattern, that can really give a break to some joints that are under strain. One person said, "I feel more aware of how unbalanced I am," and you know that can happen. Sometimes the first step is becoming aware of things, and that creates the you know, that creates an opening for a step after that, because we naturally organize ourselves to deal with the asymmetries we have, so we are often not aware of those asymmetries. One of the things that's really interesting in you know, my private practice is someone will come in and let's say their left ear is closer to their left shoulder, and then after the lesson the head is more aligned in an objective sense, but they feel that their head is more in the other direction. And because all the movements are normalized to that asymmetry, and sometimes it, you know, it just takes a little while of integrating and knowing what sensations to prioritize and to follow. I felt like a helicopter when I stood up, circling gently and continuously to balance, but the sensation I enjoyed maybe most was the softening in my hands. Yes, love it. So somebody said, please relate to the pillars of strength. So you know, I'm going to talk about this gradually over the series, but the three points that I made today relating to this lesson was, first of all, making a distinction between strain and effort. So for example, when you were circling at the end with your nose, it's not a movement that doesn't involve some effort. You have to use your whole trunk and your core muscles to do that movement. So it's not the same as, in terms of effort, as lying on your back. But it's very important to make this distinction between strain and the mobilization of strength. You were using your core strength to do that movement, but that can be a pleasurable and smooth experience. So some of the keys are, if the movement gets jerkier, if you hold your breath and you feel strain. But a lot of people don't distinguish well between effort and strain, and I think that's one of the things that is very important in terms of being able to mobilize strength. Another one I was talking about was the agonist-antagonist relationship, that we can't really utilize our full strength when the opposing muscles aren't doing their job. So that balance, that's why in Feldenkrais we'll often do, it seems very paradoxical what we're doing. And for example, we leaned forward the whole time, but you were able to look, many of you were able to look both down and up more easily. So we're mainly moving the pelvis in one direction, but yet even before we started moving it in both directions, there was a change of ability in both directions, not just in the direction we work with. And that shows how what we're working with is that agonist-antagonist relationship partially. Asymmetrical usage also interferes with the mobilization of strength as well. And it's related to the agonist-antagonist balance, but by becoming aware of, first step is becoming aware of those asymmetries. And then is not important. A lot of us have injuries such that will always be asymmetrical, or humans do function, do have asymmetries. However, what we need to be able to do is function symmetrically. And that's important also for safety and the mobilization of strength. So those are the 3 points I was making this time.
There was a question. I'm feeling challenged in telling the difference between effort and strain as someone who has a lot of range of motion and flexibility. I felt like I was taking the motions too far and then my back ached, but I had a hard time knowing where too far was.
Yeah. And I think that people who are very mobile have that particular challenge. And I do think that one way to work with that is just never go to the end of your range. Anyway, we shouldn't be working near the end of our range. So work more at, 2/3, maximum 3/4, and keep asking, are there other areas that can come along? See, this is tricky because many times when you have a lot of flexibility, some joints are working almost all the time. You'll find some joints are working much more than other joints. So for example, I have very flexible hip joints. And so one of the things over the years I learned was I would keep moving there and not using my trunk in the, fully in the ways that I could. And, once that I really started to have discomfort in the hip joints because I was using them too much. And once I got that action more spread out, clearly I was much more comfortable, and a lot of other things a lot of other issues resolved, let's say. So that's one way to work with that. It is a unique challenge when you're very flexible. You've got to restrain yourself. Somebody said they feel fantastic, but they do have some tightness in one side of their neck. And of course, each of us has our unique history and challenges, and it's not that simple to just say, okay, do this. But one thing, if right now you're feeling a little tightness, lie on your back and see if you can fully rest on your back and fully let the weight of your head be taken by the floor, and then just gently roll your head a few times right and left. And that maybe, if this is a tightness that emerged during the lesson, that might be good enough. Just when you stand up, just very gently look left and right. That could be helpful in integrating. We talk a lot about integrating these things, and you can take little bits of this lesson when you sit down, do a little bit of something that was meaningful to you, that was pleasurable, that made sense to you, and that'll help remind you about this organization. You'll have the recording, I believe, of the lesson, and it's good to do it again, but you can also take parts of it out, and because we're all sitting so much.
How does the breath get used to support the practice?
Well, our breathing, it turns out that our breathing system is so flexible and adaptable, and this is one of those things that both is an incredible ability of humans, but also gets us into trouble because people can adapt to really less than efficient breathing. So it's not uncommon that I'll come upon people in my practice who are barely moving their abdomens at all. And this is really a problem health-wise, because that movement of the diaphragm is circulating, moving the organs, and it's very important for a lot of aspects of our health, not to mention vitality, because you need more breath. So unfortunately, we have the ability to adapt and function with less than optimum breathing, or really suboptimum breathing. But the good news is that we are adaptable, and we are reaching under the bed and certain ribs aren't moving, and we can move in it. We can breathe in another part of ourselves. The breathing system is very adaptable. So we use the breathing a little bit. It's like the canary in the coal mine. The disruption of the breathing usually is one of the first things that happens when people are efforting too much and there's strain happening. So by being aware of the breath, we use that in the lessons, and of course you can use it in general, is noticing when you begin to reduce your breath. It doesn't mean you're taking these big full breaths all the time. It's more of like when you really reduce your breath, you contract the abdomen, you contract the chest. It's we use that to stop our emotions sometimes, and sometimes we need to stop our emotions, but then we don't want to stay like that.
There was question and comment. I love doing Feldenkrais, and the lesson was famous for me, or maybe fabulous. I feel lighter in my neck, but for me, it's always a big problem. I feel so tired. Why does this happen?
Well, it's interesting if it happens all the time. It's very common that people can feel tired. Some people feel energized and some people feel tired. And we tend to think that the tiredness is because there was learning that took place and there was a new pattern that was being explored, and that one of the best ways to integrate that sometimes is to rest and to sleep. So that's not uncommon. Like I said, some people feel energized and they want to go out and do too much, and some other people feel tired. Now, if you feel tired every time, that is curious to me, and I hope it's not every single time. But if it's every time, you may be somebody who's very sensitive and needs to do less and rest more during the lesson. So while other people do 10 repetitions, maybe you need to do 3 or 4 repetitions slowly, get a lot out of them, and then rest. You can try that, because it shouldn't happen that every lesson you're getting really tired.
So I know we're at our time. There are some more questions. There will be one more class tomorrow, but I wonder, Elizabeth, would you say a few sentences about the series and kind of your vision for the series?
Yeah. So we'll be, I hope to, really explore different foundational ideas in relation to strength, and utilize different kinds of lessons. Some will be more challenging than others. Tomorrow will the core will be an important part of tomorrow's lesson as well, and we're going to start with lifting something that has some weight to it and see how that develops over the course of the lesson. So that should be fun, a little different than what we usually do in awareness through movement. So
great. Maybe we'll do one more question.
okay.
Okay. And your response about the resting more was well received from the last question, so that's great. Okay, so with this next one, thank you. This certainly increased my awareness and also very practical. When I slow down, I become overwhelmed with all that is involved in sitting and movement and my scoliosis, and there is much to be aware of. That is when I become overwhelmed. How can I handle this overwhelming feeling with my poor posture and scoliosis?
Because sometimes, having overly the experience of asymmetry can get old. So I would say, when you can, find out when there are movements that you can do so you stay really small and you feel equal. Like for example, if I move my head right and left, my head moves more easily one way than the other. But there is a range that I can do it where I feel nearly the same. And actually, then I have a nice breath too. So if you can look for those moments when you get into a range where you give yourself that feeling that you, in the beginning of the movement, can move either way, and that beginning point in the movement is very, very important, and a lot can happen there. It can have profound effects on your movement in general. So it's a very interesting way to go through some of these lessons sometimes, is staying in that beginning and initiation point. And it's easier to do in some lessons than others. But if you think about this lesson, you know, one, you really could do almost all those movements much less, and perhaps giving yourself that sense of the ability to move in both directions.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I think this question about asymmetry is interesting, and I'll continue. I'll bring that up again tomorrow, related to the question we just had. Thank you, Tiffany. Really so lovely to see many familiar faces and unfamiliar faces of people from all over. It's very moving to share a moment like this with all of you. Thank you for coming.